Good afternoon, Grizzlies. How we doing? Yeah, I'll take that silence as we're doing great. Welcome to Kindred Spirits for today. Give yourselves a round of applause for showing up. Thank you for showing up today. My name is Vince. I am representing the Equity Board today and welcoming you to our series of Kindred Spirits. Today we will be talking about connecting with the archives and tools of engaging with the histories of the Valley. Next week, just kidding, next month, March 26th, is going to be Women of Distinction, a panel of SLV influencers. So please come to that. Without the further ado, I'd like to welcome your keepers of history, of knowledge and wisdom, the library team. Put your hands and feet together for our librarians.
Hello, my name is Kat Parker. I'm the library director. I'll be speaking first, but our whole team is here today, and they're going to be taking turns talking at different points of our presentation. Be gentle with us all. Librarians aren't necessarily typically known for their extrovertedness, and we're doing our best here today for you all. So let me see if my clicker works. Yeah, okay. So today we're going to be talking to you all a little bit about our archives and special collections that we have in Nielsen Library. I kind of have divided this into two questions that we're going to be answering today. So the first thing is, what are the archives and why should I use them? The second thing is finding, or how can I access the collections? And lastly, we're going to be connecting with different stories from our archives. And this is really through the form of all of our staff and the questions that we answer on an almost daily basis from the general public. We are constantly fielding questions that use our archives and special collections from our larger Valley community, from visiting researchers, from the National Forest Service. So you'll hear a little bit more about the stories today. So first, what are the archives and why should I use them? I have a question for you all. I will not make you discuss this with your group unless you just secretly want to. But I do want you to try to think back about your very first, or maybe first notable, research project. This can be in college, this can be in a K-12 universe, but think about your very first research project. Do many of you remember that project that you did? Yeah, maybe? Nod. You just have to nod a little bit for me. Yeah, thank you, thank you. When I say using the archives as a tool for engagement, I'm really thinking about engaging with these three different things. And if you think about your first research project and what you remember about it, is it connecting and engaging with a different type of information than you are used to? Maybe for some, it could be using a primary source. Maybe it's using the computer and looking for peer-reviewed articles for the first time. Maybe it's using a microfilm machine or a microfiche. But you probably connected and engaged with a different type of information than what you were used to, which maybe is why it's memorable, like you remember that. Another part of this is engaging with the stories that we find in the research, right? So this could be, like we're talking today, in the archives, but it doesn't have to only be related to that. When we think about connecting with people's stories, we're really thinking about connecting and remembering the things that we have in common with those stories, or maybe what we've learned about that. And then lastly, we really think about it as a way to engage and connect with people, right? Information is a way to find more information out about stories, and it's really a way to connect with people throughout history, throughout different cultures, throughout different spaces and time. And so today, as we're kind of going through our archives and thinking about why we use archives and why it's important, I'm really thinking about these things: information, stories, and people. A last anecdote here before I move on to my next slide is when we think about information these days, we think a lot about finding information online. I know the library does support a lot of online research, through journals and things like that. But the archives, and we will show you some of the stuff that's online, but it is primarily physical print documents, right? And there is power in searching through those types of resources. It does take time and it does take effort, but a lot of times you do connect and you remember that information you found there. You remember the stories that you found and the people that were in those stories, right? Because we're in the sub and not in the library, we did actually bring in a few things from our archives. It's on the table in the back. This is just like a small sampling of things that you can find there. And as we're talking, we will not think it's rude if you want to go back and take a look at any of those things, okay? Do maybe not touch them, especially if you've been eating. That was a really hard choice to make. We were like, we want to show them things, but also there are precious things. So do be careful with them, but do engage with them. Okay. I think, Greg, you can come up here. We can start going back and forth with. So when I say archives at Nielsen Library or Adams State, this is really what I'm talking about. We have a lot of different collections, but these are the things that we're truly talking about when we talk about our archives. We'll use archives, but it's really all of this. So I think we'll go back and forth. I'll let Greg introduce himself here in a second. But we actually have a typical archival room. We have, you can kind of see from here, hopefully you can kind of read this, but this is a description of the things that you find in those different places. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself and we'll go back and forth.
I'm Greg Wilson. My official title is the Electronic Resources Librarian. I am the ersatz archivist as well. Do you want me to start with the archives? Okay. So the archives themselves, as on the display, are a closed collection, meaning you have to get a librarian to help you use it. You have to identify which works you want beforehand. You cannot browse. It has a large amount of Adams State history, including a poster of our first graduating class of 1925. It has San Luis Valley history of all sorts, including the Terrace Irrigation Project. And we have other singular theses from the 50s, a book from the 16th century, and a large number of other, I don't want to say random because they're not, but an interesting collection of items.
Some of it is eclectic. There's not very good provenance of where everything came, but it certainly is a very interesting collection. So we also have the clippings collection, which is actually, there's a couple back there on the table if you want like a visual example of them, but librarians, I think starting even from like the 40s and 50s through the early 90s would clip the local valley newspapers apart and put the articles in them in folders based on the subject that they were about. So it really ranges quite broadly from festivals in the valley to very specific counties to people's names like Billy Adams or things like that. So it is a pretty valuable collection and it's very old. So yeah, so that's the clippings collection. I'll say another one too, which is the Cooper collection. The Cooper collection is also locked. It is in the Jack Cooper room, and it is a lot of Jack Cooper's materials that he donated to the library. Who is Jack Cooper? He was a pretty cool dude.
The Ruth Marie Colville collection started life as the Colville Room. When Miss Colville passed, she left a large bequest of items which absorbed the former Colorado Room, and the room is dedicated to Colorado history. Also, interestingly, she has many boxes of unprocessed papers that you can make an appointment to look through. As we'll hear about later, there is some very singular material in them. The Marmot Digital Archive is the digital archive of our consortium, Marmot, that has a wide range of items. We have some songs that are linked later. There's text, there's ebooks, there's whatever each individual library saw fit to upload and include.
You can do the newspaper collection. I would say we have a lot of Valley newspapers. It's like the Valley Courier specifically on microfilm we have since its like origin back in the early 1900s. So we have a pretty large collection of Valley newspapers in general. The Valley Courier is the one we have most extensive access to. We actually have more than the actual Valley Courier in town. They were celebrating a large birthday, and they actually looked through our collection to find images and capture stories from their origin back in the day. So it's pretty expansive. I won't go into detail about every single paper that we have. We have more that are in print, like bound volumes, which we have a couple back there that you can see. But all of these collections we'll show you in a second are searchable online. They don't have the things themselves aren't there, but you can see what we have there, if that makes sense. Okay, this is the part where I let Greg talk, and you be considerate of us nerding out over organization for just a minute, and then we'll move on to something else.
All right. I know I have a tendency to use jargon, so if I do, I task you two at the front tables to throw something at me so I know to speak plainly. The archives are organized by individual collection. We mentioned the Cooper collection, the Colville collection. Within the archives themselves, there are a number of collections. The McConnell-Simmons collection is one. There are others. They may have labeled shelf locations. Our newspapers do. And you could see a rough inventory done by a previous archivist of which titles are on which shelves. They're typically in chronological order, but be a little gentle with us as it doesn't get used much. And if you're using it and the volume you want is not there, take a glance around and make sure it's not on a neighboring shelf. Donors may set restrictions on the use or download in the case of digital items. Some of this will show up more in the digital archive. Some singular works cannot be downloaded but can be viewed. You could take a screenshot as an end run, but please don't do that. There are some fragile items at the back. We have some rather old books that may be in somewhat delicate condition, so that's part of why we ask that you do not touch. One collection may reference items in other collections. The Terrace Irrigation Project papers at times reference government documents held elsewhere. And the items are organized and formatted by the donor, not us. So there's the Simmons collection that I mentioned earlier is shelved in the library. There is a card catalog of associated topics, but the order was chosen by the donor, not us. Next slide, please. And the role of archives in research at Adams State is more general than you would expect. They contain material of rather limited scope. They're in the archives primarily for preservation. Some of them may be old, some of them may be delicate. They have primary source voices from various points in history, including before the adoption of statehood by Colorado. As one related example, Dr. Loosbrock used an official 160-plus volume history of the Civil War in an assignment for his Civil War history class where he tasked students to write a unit history. So they had to go to the index volumes, identify the pagination for their units, and then identify what the units were doing at various points during the war.
Some context, we were trying to give more examples of how people had used research here at Adams State, like professors and stuff in classes in the past. So that was Dr. Loosbrock. Another example that I had more recently last spring, I worked with then Dr. Sanders on English 102. It was a really cool project. Students actually chose a contemporary or a historical topic from the Valley, and we use the clippings collection I mentioned earlier to then inform that research from the students. So on my end, I was able to go to the class one day and I worked with the students on how to use our online finding aid to get ideas, and then they all kind of gave a list to Dr. Sanders and he gave that to me, and I had pulled all the items, and they came back to the library 2 or 3 times to look at the collections and to take notes. Sometimes they could take pictures of the different things too, and then they ended up having a website that they made, a Google site with the summary of the different things that they found. So one of the class, the one that I worked with in particular did festivals in the Valley, and so they had kind of gotten through and found a lot of examples of different festivals over the last 30 or 40 years and the cultural significance of those. So it was a pretty cool project. These are just 2 examples. There are a lot more probably examples out there with faculty that have used the archives in different ways. So don't think that you're being excluded. These were just the 2 most recent ones that we could think of that Greg and I had actually worked with. But if you haven't worked with it and those sound interesting to you, then you should reach out later. Okay. That kind of hopefully summarized what are our archives here, and why should I use them? Moving on next to how can I access a collection? I'm kind of like, what's the next slide, y'all, first? What we're trying to do is not say, here, you go to our website and you do this and you do this. We're trying to actually get our website up so we can show you where to go on there instead of like telling you where to go, because we thought that might be more helpful. So, yeah. This is, I guess, maybe it's not. For me, this was the most boring part of our presentation. All of our... Not that I'm super boring, but the stories that we wanted to tell with the different interactions we have with people coming into the library is the most fun part, I think. Like just we all were trying to rack our brains for the past couple of weeks of like, which story should I tell? Should I tell the time where I had a person come in. This is not my story for later, but while they're doing that, my story was. For later, it's different, but I had a person come in over the summer. He was an older gentleman, but he was actually a traveling salesman back in the 70s, and he was arrested here on false charges and put in jail for 1 night, and then he was released the next morning and they bought him a hamburger for breakfast and said sorry, and he went on his way. And he was trying to find proof that this happened to show his family. And we actually did find that newspaper article from that day saying that he was arrested on false claims, and that he was given a hamburger and the sheriff sent him on his way. It was a really funny story. I've also used our back in the day, the college had a yearbook like you would have in high school for every year, and I had a family member of someone who went here back in the 30s, and he had actually passed, and she was putting together photos and memories of him for his wake or his memorial service. And we found a lot of fun photos of him going to Adams State Normal College in the 30s in those yearbooks. So there's just so many different stories that we can tell. But I see that they have kind of gotten here. Yes. Okay, so how can you access the archives? We have these things called LibGuides. These are library research guides, and we as librarians can edit them very quickly and very easily. So a lot of our information is actually put on these LibGuides. So if you go to our research guides on our website, there's that place where it says research guides. The very first one on the list is actually Adams State Archives and Special Collections, and you can get to everything that we're going to talk about from this page. So, oh yes, they can see research guides, the first one. But if you would say like to make an appointment or you have an interest in a subject or a particular thing in the archives, we'd actually encourage you to fill out this form here that says please book a time. It takes you to a form where you just say your contact information, the subject that you're interested in, and the time that you're interested in seeing it. That really helps us track that use versus coming in on the day. Of course, we probably will help you on the day, but we also might invite you to fill out that form for us as well. So that is what it is. It's pretty quick and easy, and it just helps us track our use of the collection and our like ongoing questions and queries about the materials. Back. So, did you want to come up and do this part, or you want me to? Okay. So, a brief overview of all of this. If you click on the first one, the digital collections, this is linked out to the different collections that we actually have digitized. So the South Coloradan is the school newspaper from back in the day. It has chunks of it that has been digitized online. We also have an online photo collection on our Flickr site. This is not all of our collection of photos at all, but it is a sampling of them, and you can look at it without coming to the library. The first one is the one we mentioned earlier, the Marmot Digital Archive. This is stuff that we share in our consortium of libraries throughout the state of Colorado. We're all adding stuff to that collection.
Could you click the Colorado one, please? We recently got on microfilm the Colorado census from several years. Our microfilm machines, many of them are currently broken as far as printing, so if you come find us, we can get you one where you could print them or email it to yourself. Of singular interest is the census from before we became a state, but there are irregular ones after that. Next slide, please. These San Luis Valley collections are individual and somewhat more specific. There's the Terrace Irrigation District proceedings, uncatalogued papers, the clippings. We have several runs of the San Luis Valley Historian. Only one of them, I believe, is complete. The historical maps are of interest, uncatalogued papers. Scroll down, please. We have some sound recordings, some photographs, a time capsule. The McConnell-Simmons papers and Virginia Sanchez papers are research collections. The McConnell-Simmons one, Dr. Sines has used. So they are of academic interest.
Something just to note that once you click into these, they all have a bit of a summary of each one of what the collection is. So, and then let's click on one of the Google spreadsheets linked. Most of them have Google, it's just a Google spreadsheet of kind of the details of what the collection entails. So, you could look here and see that we've either created a finding aid or you can, it's generally just based on subject, so you'd have to know your keywords, which is why this gets a little technical, which is why for students, we would really encourage you if you had like an idea, say I want to use primary sources, I'm doing research in the Valley, if you know the topic, then if you come in with us, we can actually help you work through finding these things because they're not necessarily the easiest thing to use, but they actually are worth it. So, yeah. Okay. So I would say, if you want to scroll back up to the top, Jared, you're doing great. I know I put you on the spot with doing this right now, and I appreciate it. But yeah, like the Adams State collection would look very similar to the San Luis collection, where you have your Adams State, like the different types of collections listed, and it will drop you down to the bottom with a description of that. So you could see like our mascot history, we have the Board of Trustees, we have so many different things here. And as long as you have your keywords, you can click on any of these and kind of like search like, oh, say I'm looking for things in Costilla County. You just put Costilla County in and search and you would get some hits that way. But a lot of times librarians really are a really great resource to this because we know the collections pretty well.
We went over the scheduling a visit and the LibGuide. Yeah. So when you were in the process of using the archives, you have to take notes, pictures, or scans. We have a scanner on the second floor, and anything we have you could scan and email to yourself. Schedule a session. You'll first identify the materials you need that we have so that you know we have it. And then you schedule a session so we can make ourselves available. Plan your own visit, so bring paper, a pen. Know that you probably cannot take food or drink into the archives themselves. And plan to take notes or scans of the material because in some cases it will not be otherwise accessible. So if you forget what's in a particular archive or government document, you will have to come back to access it again.
So yes, Greg finished it off there. The summary of it is that it does require a little bit of planning and thought to use the archives. But as you can kind of see with the collections in the back and the stories that we're getting ready to start telling, it is really worth it. So as long as you have an idea of the research topics that you're interested in, or even just like, I want newspapers, I want this, I would like this. Maybe not I would like this, right? Then you can, if we have that, then you can work with us to schedule a time to really look through all of that stuff with you and really help navigate that space. So it shouldn't feel too, if you're a student or a professor, it shouldn't feel too difficult, but if you also feel very comfortable with yourself as a researcher, we would definitely encourage you to use all of those, the sites and the Google Sheets off of our website so that you can interact with the different materials and have an idea of that before you come in. But that's just based on your own preferences. Okay. So I gave you kind of a teaser earlier where they were figuring out the technical stuff, but now we're going to move into sharing different stories from the archives and the questions that we've been asked over the years. I think that this is probably one of the most valuable ways to kind of give you examples of people's queries and the things that we've done to help them to kind of inform the ways you may or may not choose to use it yourself. And every single one of our staff are going to come up and share something with you on this so that you're not just listening to me talk the whole time. But mine is first. They did tell me I had to go first. So, how many of you have heard of the San Luis Institute? A few people? I had not heard of this either before, about 2 years ago. This question came about 2 years ago. So I have a little bit of a summary up here, but essentially, back in the 30s, the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration, actually was in the Valley, and they created the San Luis Institute as this is part of the question. The question that I actually had was from an older gentleman. I believe he was in his 80s. He's from the Valley, but he's actually now living up north of Denver. So all of this was done over the phone and via email, this whole conversation that we had about this. And so I don't think he went to the Institute, but I think he had a family member or a personal tie, and he was really trying to understand the history. He knew what the Institute was. He was trying to understand more about its creation and why it was created and where all of that came from. So what we found in this was that Adams State has huge ties with this institution. It was actually created kind of as an extended type space of Adams State. So it became more of a trade school and a vocational school. They taught everything from weaving and blankets, which you'll see in another story later, to welding. I think they kind of went more towards the arts and culture stuff later, but they worked with Adams State, and actually Luther Bean was one of the original, I believe he was the director of the Institute, and I knew that. I can't remember right now off the top of my head, because I should have prepared better, but I couldn't remember why in this moment, what he was here. Was he was a president here? Does anyone know? Professor, yeah. So he was a professor here, and he was actually the director of the San Luis Institute. And I actually have a paper on that table back there that I found and actually shared with this patron on the history of why it was created, Luther Bean's connection to it, their goals of like what they were trying to accomplish there. And so we have a deep connection with the Cultural Institute as a part of Adams State. And we actually have someone who is trained there. We have one of the blankets in the Luther Bean right now. So it is a really cool space. So I have some history up here. Adams State used the building as an off-site education center for veterans during World War II and the Korean War. It was closed down in '53, and after that, it became a high school. It is actually located in San Luis. And after that, I believe it's currently they have a grant that you can research on on History Colorado, but they're actually working to turn it into a cultural center and a museum even now. So that is a process they've started there. It is slow but steady because it is grant funded, but that is what they're working towards now to get this space back because this building is still standing there. So that was one story that I thought was pretty cool. I think you're next, Greg.
Okay, so in addition to staff, students, and faculty, community members can use our archives too. In about my second month of working here, Ms. Deborah Romero came in wanting to do research on Canciones del Pasado. We have a digital link to some of the 1967 recordings. In a lot of Ruth Marie's unprocessed papers, there are more types on a variety of formats. Some of them are VHS, some of them are cassette, and some of them are reel-to-reel tapes of various sizes and widths. So one of the challenges of archives is that the formats you get are an eclectic mix based on what was available at the time it was donated. If you have phones and want to listen to some of these songs, by all means take a picture of the QR code. And we are currently still researching this, going through, she's writing a book about it, she's in the audience today, and it's going well. This is the slide advance.
I'm Amanda Langdon, librarian at Adams State, and I've worked with Dr. Jessica Brown, and she was interested in a class on bookmaking and asked me if there was anything cool in the archives that I could present some information on. So we looked at a number of different things. The book on the left is probably the oldest material in the collection, at least that I found. It's from 1645. It has vellum binding or parchment binding, and was probably rebound, given that the pages were trimmed and stuff like that. So the other one pictured here is a really interesting Bible. It's very well worn, but it's in great shape given its age because it was done on cloth paper, rag paper, instead of wood pulp. Wood pulp tends to have more acid in it, and so it actually eats itself away. So I've got a couple of examples back there of some really cool old books that we looked at for this class, including one that is in multiple pieces, but it's a great demo of showing how books were put together and the different parts and layers to that. So if you have any interest in seeing those, feel free to come on back. And in the meantime, I will pass it on to Patricia.
So my story is not about me helping someone with the archives, but with help that I received when I was working on a really big project. I was a Salazar Rio Grande del Norte Center intern from fall of 2018 to spring of 2020. And the major project that I undertook during that time was to curate and mount an exhibition from the museum collections. And the Luther Bean Museum has a small but handsome collection of Rio Grande blankets, which are Hispanic woven textiles. And two of those textiles are shown here on the slide. And both of these textiles were in the exhibition. At the outset, I had virtually no knowledge of this topic, and so I set out on a quest to find the visual and technical aspects for the project. And I visited museums with Rio Grande blanket collections and met with the curators. I was fortunate to bring in a consultant who gave us detailed information about the blankets in our collection. And mostly, though, I needed to do extensive research on the history of these textiles, on the sheep and wool, and preparation and spinning of wool, on natural and synthetic dyes and dye processes, on types of looms and weaving techniques, and on blanket design. And that process started here at the Nielsen Library. As I researched, I found materials in the general collection and in the journals and periodicals, and there was material in the Ruth Marie Colville collection, which is a closed collection. Mary Walsh and Karen Melgaris helped me to access that material. And here on the slide are some pages out of some of that material. So there's pages from the San Luis Valley Historian and some books that I found in that collection. As research went on, I found materials in a lot of different libraries and collections, but some of the most valuable material did come from the special collections here at the Nielsen Library.
Hello, my name is Melissa Tuioti Mariner. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you. Okay. I'm happy to be here today and to be able to see a lot of friendly faces. Thank you for being here and supporting our library staff. The archives is something I did not know a whole lot about. I would definitely say home base for me is circulation. That's where you can find me almost all the time. But I have had the opportunity to put on my archivist hat now and then and assist some of our researchers and patrons that have come through the Nielsen Library. I've had some really cool experiences in our archive collection. The one I chose to share today, the archive experience I chose to share, comes from this past summer, the month of July and August. We saw this crazy influx of environmental engineers, environmental scientists, water researchers, and even some legal teams that were going to be preparing litigation to present in Colorado's water courts. And so I happened to be the one that was able to take these questions. I had two people, they were based out of upstate New York, and they were coming to prepare to change water rights from agricultural to municipal, which is really hard to do. And so they were asking for some of our historical land maps. I was able to dive into a lot of our Colville collection, where a lot of the local farmers were able to keep records and keep all sorts of data about things like snowpack, snow melt, when these tributary rivers would fill up. I did not know that actually tributary rivers feed and add water to the main rivers. I thought it was the other way around. So it was so cool to work with these water researchers. My oldest daughter is a water engineer. Shout out, she's participating online. But it was really interesting. And we were able to find tributary rivers throughout the San Luis Valley. One of a researcher, a water researcher that came through was based out of Denver, Boulder area, and he came in to collect data because pumping fees here in our local farms and ranches had gone up substantially. And so this is a local farm out over closer into the southern part of San Luis Valley. This is a local farm who saw these pumping fees just soar. This is the Rio Grande River, so it was really cool to see how, in order to gain these water rights, we also were able, through some of our journals in our Colville room, to find original ownership of water rights and how hard that is to have third parties purchase these original water rights. So it was super cool. The archives, it is a treasure trove. Honestly, sometimes I love to just tag along with other librarians because I get to just soak up all of their knowledge, and they do a phenomenal job. We've got a great research librarian with us today, Mr. Mark Skinner, who's probably the best K through 12 research librarian. And so, yeah, thank you for your support today. I'm going to pass this on to the phenomenal Miss Karen. Oh, Jared.
Okay. No, I'm good. I'm good. I'll try to speak loud enough. One of my favorite archive questions, it seems like Greg and I are always looking for information from archives since he's been working here. Because he knows that, I have to say this, I'm like an archive myself now, it seems. But this one really stood out because we had a call from somebody in Colorado Springs, UCCS. He was writing a master's thesis and he wanted information on Adams State college students that were suspended, he said the 60s, in a Chicano rights movement. So Greg and I had to start, we started, when we couldn't just go straight to the 60s, it was about the books being moved from the library, the Chicano collection, and so that was like, what? No, the library would never do that. So it was really interesting to me to find this story. And we started by asking Tawny and Nick. I'm sorry that Nick left, because he led us to a video that I have in the references page, which was produced in his Chicano Studies class by Kaylee Gomez and Chris Quintana, and it's on there on YouTube, which I recommend anybody to watch if you're interested in this. But what we found, it was, and we kind of laid it out that this, and I'll just read it if it's okay. The students protested that the Chicano book collection was removed from a specific room in the library. And 4 students were then suspended as a result of protests of that removal. And this is the reference to the Manuel Lopez. He was the Colorado Rural Legal Services attorney who represented the students at a hearing in Denver, the Denver Federal Court, regarding their suspension. And then the students won in the Federal District Court hearing. The judge stated that it was a First Amendment freedom of speech and freedom of assembly case. And then the students were reinstated to their classes and were able to make up for the weeks of classes that they missed. Arnold Salazar was that student in those pictures, and he later became our president of our Board of Trustees like 40 years later. And the video will tell the story if you're interested. So, thank you.
If you all on the table, your table has something that says Archives and Special Collections FAQ, and on the back is a QR code, and that takes you to a Google slide with everything we've talked about linked there. So if you want to just get a straight link to that video, you can look at this, okay? I think everyone should have one of these on their table if they're interested. I need the clicker. There, okay, I was like, that really takes us to the end. We could go on and on about our stories for a long time. They're fascinating. The stuff around the Chicano movement in the Valley is really quite astounding, and I didn't learn about a lot of it until I moved here. So, okay. Because we're close on time, I will skip past this, but you all have an FAQ page around, maybe on your table, and it kind of goes through things that I thought we may not have time to talk about today that are also important, so please take a second to take a look at that. It also has a link to our reference page of everything we talked about today. But I do want to give the last couple of minutes before 1 o'clock. If anybody has any other questions or comments, or a story they would like to share, it is now the time. This is a hard and complicated question because almost every week we have someone ask us to donate to our library collection and or archive. So what our process right now is we really take a look, and Greg will speak to this a little bit, but we really take a look at a couple of different things. How significant was this person to Adams State? How significant is the collection to Adams State or the Valley, the San Luis Valley? Those are the two things that we lead with. How rare is this item, right? I think that those are things that we kind of lead with asking first. For example, there was someone who wanted us to accept a donation of some sound recordings of poetry by an author from Grand Junction. We actually reached out to the archive in Grand Junction because we felt, or in Mesa, because we thought that that archive would be a better fit. So we do try to figure out the best place for really cool materials, whether it's always here or not. But for us, that we were like, okay, well, that's maybe not a Valley or a local author, but it is still really cool. Let's see if we can figure out a way to connect that person with that. But once we choose to accept it, usually based on connection to the college in the Valley and its rareness, we then create a finding aid that you all see here. We kind of go through processing it and stuff like that. Does that somewhat answer your question? Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah. One of the things we have to watch out for, we accepted a donation from the U.S. Forest Service of some back titles of a journal. They shipped us those back titles of a journal, along with the rest of that title, the rest of another title, and a bunch of garbage that came out of somebody's office. So we have to root through 10 boxes to find the maybe 8 volumes of a journal from the very early 20th century. So if you or anybody else is interested in donating to us, first thing, come have a conversation with either Kat or myself about what it is, the scope of the collection, the number of items. You know, it doesn't have to be a precise number, but on the order of type thing.
We do try to house things as best as we can, but it is hard because we are limited in space, so we have to be really thoughtful about those inclusions. And then people who sometimes they don't ask us, they'll just come and just leave 4 boxes at the library, and we'll be like, what is this? Anyway, thank you. Any other thoughts or questions? Thank you all for sticking with us this long. We appreciate it. Come by and see us if you have any questions about any of the things we talked about today.
Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for showing up for our colleagues on behalf of the Equity Board and the Office of Inclusivity. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Our next is going to be March 26th. It's a Women in Distinction panel on recognition of Women's History Month. So have a wonderful day. Have a grizzly great day. Stick around. Talk to our wonderful librarians. Come look at the archives with your eyes. And I'll see y'all around. Have a wonderful day. Bye.